The apartheid in South Africa began in 1948 because racial segregation and the blacks wanted some respect and racial equality from whites in South Africa. The apartheid policy was effective since it aimed at achieving its goal of favoured treatment for the whites. The apartheid actually ended in 1990 in South Africa when the apartheid laws were demolished.
I am Nelson Mandela and I was born in the village of Umatatu. I grew up with my two sisters and my mother in the village of Quinu. My father also came to live with us later but passed away from an unknown illness. Beginning my law studies at the University of Witwatersrand, I was the only native African student. Though facing racism, I made strong friendship with a number of students. The black and coloured people of South Africa protested against this inequality of the apartheid and chose me to lead them. Working with the African National Council, my apartheid efforts increased. In forms of protest, people wanted to bomb places of significance to the apartheid, although I led them away from it, and it was always planned to avoid anyone being hurt or killed. Due to me being the leader of all the protests, in 1964, I was sentenced to life imprisonment. I spent almost 27 years in jail, although I never gave up hope. Once I was released, I straight away went back to working for justice and equality for all South Africans. After all of my work, I was then elected to be the President of South Africa on the 10th of May 1994.
I was born on the 26th of September 1936 in Eastern Cape, South Africa, to my dad Columbus and my mum Gertrude. My father was a minister in the Terazaki government, forestry and agriculture department, while my mother was a domestic science teacher and died when I was only 8 years. Regularly imprisoned by the apartheid government. I was tortured, subjected to house arrest, kept under surveillance, and held in private confinement for years and banished to a remote town. During the later years of Nelson's imprisonment, I was the leading opponent to the white minority rule government. When Nelson was imprisoned, I was exiled to Brantford and was forced to stay there. The only time I could leave was when I visited Nelson on Robert Island in early 1969. I spent 18 months in private confinement at a prison.
I am Desmond Tutu. I was born in Klerksdorp to my dad Zach and Leah as their only son. My family had moved to Johannesburg when I was 12 years old. My mum was a cleaner and a cook at a school for blind people, and my dad was a teacher. In 1985, both the UK and US stopped all investments to South Africa, and as a result, the disinvestment took over. I took advantage of the situation and organised peaceful marches of 30,000 people on the streets of Cape. I was also the Bishop of Lesotho from 1976 to 1978. I got the position of Secretary General of South Africa Council of Churches in 1978. Being in such a good position, I was able to work against the apartheid with the help and support of most churches. I was even jailed briefly in 1980 after a protest march. Many thought that my international reputation and my advocacy of non-violence was my protection from harsher punishments. I disagree, and I did not see I did wrong.
During the apartheid, the black people were treated very badly. They had their own bars, their own estates, their own toilets, and their own public transport. If a black person was to go into a white man's area, territory, whatever, they would be severely punished or worse. The black people were treated this way because they were different, not understood by white people.
To get their point across to the white people, the black people did peaceful marching, silent protests, and after Nelson Mandela was locked up, they put pressure on the government to abolish black people laws.
The apartheid begins after the 1948 election.
In December 1956, Nelson Mandela is arrested for treason.
Separate homelands are created for major black groups. 1957.
March 21st, 1960, 69 people are killed in the Sharpeville massacre.
June 16, 1976. More than 600 students are killed in the Swantou massacre.
February 11th, 1990, Nelson Mandela is released from prison.
May 10th, 1994, Nelson Mandela becomes President of South Africa.
Overall outcomes of the apartheid was that the blacks had racial equality and they were allowed to associate with the white